This is episode 18, where we explore how humans have always lived in post-truth world and why that matters now more than ever.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Today, we're plunging into a stack of source material you sent over that really tackles a huge question we hear constantly. Are we actually living in some new era of post-truth?
Yeah, this idea that we're just drowning in fake news and disinformation everywhere we look.
Exactly. And these sources, they offer a fascinating challenge to that, suggesting, well, maybe this isn't so new after all.
A different perspective entirely.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack these materials you shared, see what they tell us. Is this post-truth thing really a recent development?
Or is it something deeper? What's the history of our relationship as humans with fiction versus truth?
Right. And if it's not new, why does it feel so, I don't know, urgent and important right now? We'll stick strictly to the insights and examples in the material provided.
Okay, good plan. Where should we start?
Well, maybe let's set the scene with a contemporary example the sources use, one that really captures that feeling of truth being elastic. They point to Crimea.
Ah, yes, late February 2014. You had these Russian special units, obviously professional soldiers, popping up and occupying key places.
But crucially, no insignia, the little green men, as they were called.
And then came the denial from the Russian government, from President Putin himself. He claimed they weren't Russian troops at all.
He said they were what, spontaneous self-defense groups?
Yeah, who apparently just happened to find advanced Russian military gear in local shops. The sources are clear. Putin and his team knew they were lying as they said it.
Okay, so a clear denial. But the sources dig deeper into the justification rail.
They do. They explore this idea that, for some Russian nationalists, this kind of lie could be seen as serving a higher truth. The argument goes, if it's okay to kill for a just cause, why wouldn't it be okay to lie for one?
And that higher cause is...
The preservation of the sacred Russian nation. There's this powerful national myth. The sources describe Russia as a 1,000-year entity, always under attack, always needing defense.
So from that perspective, enemies like NATO, the US, the EU, they're trying to break Russia apart.
Exactly. By creating what they see as fake countries on Russia's borders, like Ukraine in the 1990s.
So within that myth, the existence of Ukraine as a separate nation is actually the bigger lie.
That's the argument presented, that Ukraine being separate is a far more fundamental falsehood than Putin's denials about the troops. So the invasion or reintegration is seen as correcting a historical wrong.
Wow. Okay, so you have the official denial, but it's wrapped in this really potent national myth. But there's another side to this, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. The sources present the counter perspective very strongly. Ukrainian citizens, international observers, historians, they're outraged.
They call the claim that Ukraine isn't a real nation, what was the phrase? An atom bomb lie.
Yes, an atom bomb lie, because it ignores so much. It ignores historical facts. The sources mention Kyiv and Moscow were only united for about 300 years out of that supposed 1,000.
It ignores international law, too, right? Treaties Russia signed recognizing Ukraine.
Recognizing its sovereignty, its borders.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, it just completely ignores what millions of Ukrainians themselves think about their own identity, don't they get to say?
That seems fundamental. And Ukrainian nationalists, the sources say, have their own view on fake countries.
Right. They'd say, sure, there are fake countries involved, but it's the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics set up by Russia. Those are the fakes, masks for intervention.
So looking at both sides, you really get this intense feeling. It does seem like a scary time where whole histories, whole nations can just be fabricated or denied.
It definitely feels that way. And this leads right back to that core question in the sources. If this is the era of post-truth, when exactly was the age of truth?
Yeah, was it the 80s, the 50s, the 1930s? What supposedly changed? Was it the internet, social media, certain politicians?
The sources really push back on that idea of novelty. They say, let's look back further.
And when we do, propaganda, denying nations, it's old news.
Pretty much. The sources give quite a few historical examples. Think back to 1931. Japan.
What happened there?
The Japanese army literally staged fake attacks on itself to create a pretext to invade China. Then they set up Manchukuo.
The puppet state. A fake country, basically.
Exactly, to legitimize their conquest. Or think about China's long-standing denial of Tibetan independence.
Okay. Or closer to Western history.
British settlement in Australia, justified by Terra Nullius's Nobody's Land.
Which completely ignored what, 50,000 years of Aboriginal history?
Just erased it. A convenient legal fiction.
The sources mention Zionism, too.
Yeah, the early slogan about a people without a land returning to a land without a people. again, conveniently overlooking the Arab population already living there.
And Golda Meir's famous quote from '69.
There is no Palestinian people, and never was. The sources point out that even today, despite decades of conflict with people who identify as Palestinian, similar views persist.
They mention a specific example from the Israeli parliament.
Annette Berko, in 2016, she questioned the very reality of a Palestinian people, partly based on linguistics.
Linguistics? How?
Her argument, as cited, was that the letter P doesn't exist in Arabic, so how could there be Palestine? Forgetting, of course, that F often stands for P in Arabic, and the name is Palestine.
So using language itself to deny identity, it's a recurring pattern.
It really is. These historical examples are there to build the main argument.
Which is?
That this isn't some new era we've stumbled into. The core thesis in the material is stark. Humans have always lived in an age of post-truth.
Always. So Homo sapiens is fundamentally a post-truth species.
That's the claim. And the reason, according to the sources, is tied directly to our success. Our power relies on creating and, crucially, believing in fictions.
Fictions, like myths and stories.
Exactly. Since the Stone Age, self-reinforcing myths have been what allowed human collectives to cooperate on a large scale. The sources argue we conquer the planet not just because we're smart, but because we can create, spread, and convince millions to buy into fictional stories.
And believing the same stories allows cooperation.
Yes. If everyone believes in the same gods or the same nation or the same laws or the same money, they can work together effectively.
Okay, so let's compare these fictions. The sources make a potentially controversial comparison between religious myths and fake news.
They do, and they acknowledge it might be upsetting, but it's central to their point. For centuries, news traveling through social networks included stories of miracles, angels, demons, witches, things accepted as fact by millions.
Stories without scientific backing, like Adam and Eve or caste rules, believed for millennia.
Right. The sources have this memorable line, "Some fake news lasts forever."
And they offer that definition. 1,000 people believing a lie for a month is fake news.
But 1 billion people believing it for 1,000 years? That's religion. And you're often told not to call that fake news.
Now, it's important the sources stress this isn't saying religion or fiction is bad, right?
Not at all.
Huh.
It's presented as an incredibly powerful tool. Fiction inspires cooperation, builds amazing things. Hospitals, schools, bridges, not just armies and prisons.
Like the Chartres Cathedral example, Adam and Eve might be fiction, but the cathedral is real, beautiful, and exists because of that belief.
Precisely. They even compare the Bible to other great fiction. Don Quixote, Harry Potter, saying they all have power to bring joy, inspire courage, or compassion.
And if you view the Bible metaphorically, full of wisdom.
The sources ask, isn't that true of Harry Potter too? Can't fiction hold deep truths?
But what about fundamentalist views, believing every word is literal truth?
Then the sources challenge that by asking, what about the Quran, the Talmud, the Vedas? Aren't those seen as fictions by outsiders? What about Roman emperors declared gods by the Senate?
Like Augustus or Claudius? That seems pretty political.
Definitely. And they even mention Emperor Hirohito in Japan after WWII, publicly stating he wasn't divine, effectively admitting the fiction that Japanese militarism relied on.
So even if one text is true for you, billions have lived by other fictions that were still powerful and inspiring.
That's the point. Fictions have shaped almost all human societies for millennia.
But fictions have a dark side too. The sources bring up the Hugh of Lincoln story.
Yes, a truly horrifying example from 1255 England. A boy's body is found. Rumor instantly spreads, no social media needed, that Jews ritually murdered him.
And it wasn't just rumor, a chronicle wrote it down.
Matthew Paris. He wrote this detailed, gruesome account claiming Jews from all over England met to torture and crucify the child. Pure invention.
With terrible consequences.
The devastating. 19 Jews tried and executed based on this lie. It fueled pogroms elsewhere, contributed to all Jews being expelled from England in 1290.
And the story didn't die. Chaucer used it.
Over a century later, yes, in the Canterbury Tales, it became a persistent, poisonous anti-Semitic trope.
And the sources connect this to modern fake news.
They draw a parallel to the 2016 Pizzagate story. The baseless claim about Hillary Clinton and a child trafficking ring in a pizza place basement. Enough people believed it that someone showed up with a gun.
Meanwhile, Hugh of Lincoln became a saint.
Venerated as a saint, buried in the cathedral, drew pilgrims for centuries, all based on a lie.
And the church only repudiated it when?
Incredibly late. 1955, 10 years after the Holocaust. Lincoln Cathedral put up a plaque finally stating these stories were baseless fictions that cost innocent lives and didn't credit Christendom.
Which leads to that stark conclusion from the sources.
Well, some fake news lasts only 700 years.
Beyond religion, there are ideological fictions, too. National myths, political systems.
Absolutely. Each nation spins its own mythology. Communism, fascism, liberalism, they all built elaborate belief systems, often presented as unquestionable truth.
The sources quote Goebbels.
A lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. Or Hitler in Mein Kampf, on repeating a few points relentlessly. The sources ask, can modern fake news really improve on that?
They mention the Soviets as masters of this.
Oh, yes. Rewriting history, even airbrushing photos. The example of Stalin and Gelia Markizova is chilling.
The little girl embracing him, the happy Soviet childhood picture.
That one, it was everywhere, an icon. But then, her father was arrested, executed as an enemy of the people. Her mother, exiled, died suspiciously.
So what happened to the picture of Stalin with the daughter of an enemy?
They fixed it. Gelia just vanished from the story. The girl in the photo was suddenly identified as Mamlakat Nakagova, a 13-year-old cotton-picking hero.
Even though she clearly didn't look 13 in the photo.
Nope. But who would dare point that out? The risk was too great.
And the Soviets hid much worse, didn't they?
Mass atrocities, like the Ukrainian famine in the 1930s, killing millions, while Western intellectuals were praising the USSR. The sources argue, for all the complaints about deception today, it's much harder now for a regime to hide something on that scale.
Okay, and this extends even to commerce, branding.
Definitely. Branding is all about repeating a fictional story, linking Coca-Cola to youth and health, for instance.
Even though the reality is, sugary drinks aren't healthy.
Right. But billions spent on marketing create that subconscious association. Billions believe the fiction, linking Coke to fun, youth, vitality.
So all these examples build the case. Truth hasn't always been top priority for humans, and maybe being wrong isn't always a disadvantage.
Exactly. The sources challenge the idea that misrepresenting reality always leads to failure. It's more complex.
Human cooperation depends on a balance between truth and fiction.
A very delicate balance. Distort reality too much and yes, you fail. Like the Maji believing magic stopped bullets.
Or the Jews believing God would fight the Romans directly. Those fictions clash too hard with reality.
Fatal clashes. But, and this is key, you can't organize masses without any mythology. Pure reality doesn't inspire enough people.
So some myths, even if false, can lead to success, unlike the ones that were too unrealistic.
Precisely. The sources suggest successful movements like the Mahdi or the Maccabees relied on powerful myths, unlike the failed revolts.
And here's where the sources make that really provocative point about false stories having an advantage.
Yeah, that believing something absurd is a better test of loyalty. If a leader says the sun rises in the west, only the truly loyal will clap. Believing obvious truths proves nothing about group cohesion.
So sharing belief in a really outrageous story signals strong bonds, stronger than just agreeing on facts.
That's the argument. It shows your neighbors will stand with you no matter how absurd the situation seems.
Okay, but what about things like money or corporations? Don't we know those are just conventions, not fictions we deeply believe in?
We might think we do. Someone might say, I believe others believe the dollar is valuable, framing it as a convention.
But the sources say it's not that clear-cut.
Not in practice. Most people treat a dollar bill as inherently valuable. Put them in an fMRI, show them cash, and the greedy parts of the brain light up, not the skeptical convention analysis parts.
And we learn respect for money, like we learn respect for holy books, through seeing others treat them as valuable or sacred.
Pretty much. Through repeated social conditioning, we forget the fictional or conventional basis day to day.
Like with corporations, they're legal fictions, but we treat them like real entities.
99% of the time, yes.
Yeah.
We don't constantly think, interacting with a legal construct. We treat Google or Ford like, well, like entities.
And this blurring of fiction and reality serves many purposes. Fun, identity, community.
Fun, like in games or novels.
Yeah.
Survival. Identity, the sources use the great line. Nations and religions are football clubs on steroids. It builds community, enables cooperation, but also, sadly, violence.
So we have this ability to know and not know at the same time.
Or rather, we can know if we stop and think critically, but usually we don't. We know money's a fiction if we focus, but we usually don't. We know football rules are made up, but not in the heat of the game. We know nations are stories, but not usually when at war.
We can see Adam and Eve as myth if we demand ultimate truth, but how often do we demand that?
Rarely. in the flow of daily life,
Hmm.
which leads to the source's conclusion about truth and power.
They diverge.
Sooner or later, yes. Seeking power often means spreading fictions. Seeking truth often means giving up power, because the truth might undermine the fictions holding your group together.
Scholars face this dilemma. Serve power or truth?
Historically, the most powerful scholarly establishments, priests, mandarins, ideologues, chose unity, reinforcing the shared story over pure, potentially disruptive truth. And that's why they became powerful.
So as a species, we prefer power to truth.
The sources suggest so. We spend more effort controlling the world than understanding it. And we often seek understanding in order to control it better. If you want a society run purely on truth, try chimps, the sources cheekily suggest.
Okay, but after all that, fake news is still a problem now, right? This isn't a free pass to lie.
Absolutely not. The sources are very clear on this. Understanding the history doesn't mean shrugging our shoulders now. It's wrong to say everything is fake news or truth is impossible.
Because real facts and real suffering exist.
Undeniably. Think of Ukraine again, the deaths, the displacement. That suffering is real, even if caused by belief in fiction.
So we still have to try and distinguish reality from fiction, even if it's hard.
We must. And avoid the fiction of easy answers like pure good versus pure evil. Reality is messy. Some sources are better than others, even if imperfect.
Like the Churchill versus Stalin example. Churchill embellished, but was way more reliable.
Or comparing the New York Times in the 30s to Pravda or Der Stürmer. Yes, NYT had biases, but it aimed for accuracy in a way the others simply didn't.
So the responsibility is on us to check our sources.
Yes, invest time and effort. We can't check everything, so focus on investigating the sources we rely on most. Our go-to paper, website, network, pundit.
And the sources give 2 rules of thumb to get out of the brainwashing machine.
Rule number 1, pay for reliable information.
If you get your news for free, you might well be the product.
Exactly. They use that analogy. Refuse 30-month to be brainwashed, but happily accept free brainwashing. Don't fall for it. Pay for quality journalism if you can.
Rule 2.
For really important issues, read the scientific literature. Peer-reviewed articles, academic books, work by reputable scholars.
Acknowledging science isn't perfect, but it's our best tool.
It's been the most reliable source of knowledge for centuries. If you disagree with the scientific consensus, the sources say, understand the theory you're rejecting and bring empirical evidence.
And scientists need to speak up more.
Engage in public debate within their expertise. Silence isn't neutral. It often supports the status quo, fictions and all.
And communicate better, beyond academic papers.
Yes. Popular science, art, even fiction. The sources suggest scientists writing sci-fi isn't a bad idea at all.
Why science fiction?
Because art shapes public perception profoundly. Sci-fi is hugely influential on how people understand AI, bioengineering, climate change. A good sci-fi movie might have more political impact than a scientific article.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway isn't that post-truth is new.
No, is that understanding how humans have always used and relied on fiction, that's the key to navigating today's information chaos.
Recognizing our species' reliance on shared stories gives us a framework.
Tools and insights.
Yeah.
It highlights why being critical consumers, verifying sources, supporting reliable information is so vital.
And it leaves us with that final provocative thought from the sources.
Right. If our power is built on fiction, and we tend to prefer power over truth, is the goal really to eliminate fiction?
Or is it to get much better at telling the difference, discerning which fictions help us cooperate and build good things, and which ones cause real harm and suffering?
And how do you, the listener, draw that line in your own life for yourself and your communities? It's a tough question.
It really is. Well, thank you for sharing the source material that prompted this fascinating deep dive.
And thank you for going on this journey with us.